You ever notice how the people yelling loudest about community are the same ones who'll stab you in the back the minute you stand your ground? Let me back up a sec. Because, man, the day Vivian Blackwater stormed up to my dock and told me to get off my own lake, waving her manicured finger in my face with her whole HOA firing squad lined up behind her, I realized just how far folks will go when they think power is the same thing as law. Yeah, that happened. And no, I didn't flinch. I just let their words drop onto the still water, like trash nobody wanted to pick up. See, that morning had that post-rain freshness, coffee steaming in my hand, honeysuckle thick in the air. My koi, golden, pearl, ruby, the rest, glided under the surface, as calm as if nothing could touch them, not knowing they were about to be the center of a war. 50 grand worth of living art. Not that any of these HOA folks cared about that. These fish were a promise I'd made to Governor Richardson and a legacy my grandfather left me, when I wasn't about to let some bored suburban general trample. Vivian strutted around in her expensive tracksuit, acting like she'd marched all the way from Rome to conquer my patch of paradise. 3 years running that HOA, and every day made her more convinced she was queen. Behind her, the usual chorus, Tom Bradley, forever sniffing after the scent of authority, Susan Morris, who thought she could solve everything with a stern look and a guilt trip, Robert Chun, crunching social scenarios like tax returns, and Marcus Williams, new enough to think HOA politics mattered in the real world. Vivian got that edge in her voice, the kind that works on teenagers, but not on anyone who's ever had a drill sergeant. This lake is community property. You're trespassing, she spat. Already so sure of herself, I almost felt sorry for her. I set my coffee down on the old table I built with my own hands, right next to my tackle box. Everything as organized as it was back in the Corps. When I finally answered, it was with the same measured calm I'd used with a nervous recruit. You seem confident about property rights this morning. She took that as a win. Mistake number 1. People confuse calm with surrender. Never ends well for them. I unfolded my ace in the hole. A letter, heavy cream paper, gold seal, the works. Department of Agriculture, 1943, granting the Harper family exclusive fishing and management rights in perpetuity. The kind of thing that makes lawyers sweat and politicians forget what they promised last week. You could feel the air go thick as I read it out loud, word by word, letting it settle like dust after a gunfight. Vivian's face did a color wheel from red to white to somewhere in between. The rest of her crew? Shuffling their feet, looking anywhere but at me. Then Marcus tried to salvage the disaster, talking about laws changing, the world moving on. I just smiled. Does the Constitution expire because it's old? Federal law doesn't care if you find it inconvenient. The others started drifting off, suddenly remembering dentist appointments. But Vivian wasn't done. She clung to the hope of some loophole, a statute of limitations that could erase 7 decades of federal precedent. I knew exactly why this confrontation was happening now. The black sedan parked up the street every Tuesday and Thursday, the not-so-casual questions from new neighbors, the guy in the suit taking pictures. None of this was about fishing. It was about money. Someone wanted my land, and they'd sent the HOA in first like pawns on a chessboard. That's when I told her, while you're researching penalties for interfering with federal property, maybe check the fines, $10,000 per incident. With witnesses, it adds up fast. Marcus paled like he'd seen his tax return audited live. But behind all this, I was thinking about the bigger picture. My grandfather, Thomas Harper, didn't just fish. He built this lake as part of a wartime water system, supplying the area during blackouts and sabotage scares. That document wasn't just about fish, it was about infrastructure and trust. By the end of the week, it became clear who was really pulling strings. Harrison Development Corporation. Charles Morrison, their CEO, had a habit of rolling into small towns, buying up property by hook or by crook. Mixed use was his code for packing as many people into the neighborhood as possible, then cashing out. He was playing a long game, using the HOA as his foot soldiers. Things escalated fast. First, it was flyers in every mailbox. Is it fair for one resident to monopolize a community lake? Next, a Facebook group popped up overnight, Reclaim Our Lake, full of slick graphics and manufactured outrage. They even roped in the local reporter, Emily Brooks, who swallowed their talking points until she realized her editor was getting advertising money from the same developer. Suddenly, the story became Lake Access Dispute Divides Millbrook, a neat way to frame an illegal land grab as a neighborhood spat. I started getting pressure from neighbors, compromise offers, veiled threats. Linda Hayes, who I thought was a friend, told me folks were getting nervous about property assessments and zoning decisions. I could see it plain. Morrison's crew was building a case, not for court, but for public opinion and intimidation. And then, twist of all twists, the crime they committed wasn't just against me or my fish. It was against everyone. Two men, sent by Morrison and tipped off by Vivian, snuck onto my property at 2 a.m., dumped industrial-grade herbicide and fish toxin into the lake, thinking it would force me to sell by making the place worthless. But they didn't understand. This lake wasn't just a pretty pond. It was a linchpin in the water system feeding 3 neighborhoods, 3,000 people. At 6:30 that morning, I knew something was wrong. The smell hit me before I saw the fish. My champions, Golden, Pearl, all of them, floating belly up. I was gutted. By noon, the emergency rooms were packed. Kids from the local elementary got sick first, then entire families. My neighbor's sister, Margaret Blackwater, a doctor who worked nights at the hospital, nearly died after drinking contaminated water. In all, 67 people poisoned, babies, elderly, my own enemies among them. The investigation blew the lid off everything. Earl Thompson, the HOA's security guy, turned whistleblower. He'd taken photos, recorded Vivian admitting she didn't care if the fish lived or died, just wanted me out. Suddenly, the EPA, the FBI, every agency with an acronym, descended on our little community. Environmental terrorism, conspiracy, attempted murder, racketeering, the charges piled up like bad debts. In court, Margaret took the stand, weak but fierce, calling out her own sister for what she'd done. Emily Brooks redeemed herself, exposing the money trail from Morrison to the HOA and the media. The jury took less than 2 hours, full victory. $2 million in damages, criminal prosecutions, Morrison and Vivian both hauled away in handcuffs. The cheers outside the courthouse drowned out the last whimpers of those who'd tried to defend the indefensible. But here's the kicker. Morrison's scheme wasn't just local. He'd done this in 7 states, bribing officials, buying influence, and weaponizing HOAs to take what wasn't his. Now, federal agents were tearing through his files, unspooling the whole web. The Millbrook case set off national reforms, new laws to protect veterans' land rights, tougher penalties for environmental sabotage, even international investigations into the foreign money behind these scams. Afterward, you could feel the change. The same neighbors who'd once sided with the HOA showed up at my door with casseroles and apology letters. Linda Hayes, tears in her eyes, begged forgiveness for letting fear steer her. Nathan Cole, who owned the local fishing store, started a fundraiser for lake restoration. Kids from the elementary school learned about water conservation here, right where the whole fight started. Margaret became a community leader, teaching about public health and standing up to pressure. Her courage made her a hero. Of course, not everyone came around. Some folks still muttered about federal overreach and deep state conspiracies. You know how it is. Some people'd rather believe a lie that flatters them than a truth that shames them. We dealt with a few more broken windows, some crank calls. But mostly we healed. Because the people who tried to tear us apart had underestimated how much stronger you get when you come through hell together. The ending? The state declared my lake an environmental preservation site, protected for good. Governor Richardson himself showed up, handed me 5 new champion koi named Hope, Justice, Courage, Wisdom, and Friendship. We held a community barbecue right there on the dock, survivors and skeptics alike. And for once, everyone understood that property rights and environmental protection aren't enemies. They're the backbone of a real community. A year later, I fish most mornings, usually with Nathan or Margaret for company. The lake is clearer than ever. Kids come here to learn what happens when people stand together and say enough. The memory of those days, the betrayal, the loss, the fight, is always close, but so is the feeling of redemption, of building something that lasts. We didn't just win for me, we set a precedent. Now, all over the country, people facing the same kind of threats know there's a way to fight back and win, if you've got the facts, the patience, and a little help from your friends. So let me ask you, have you ever had to fight for what's rightfully yours? Had to stand alone, knowing the cost, but did it anyway because giving in would cost you even more? Tell your story in the comments, because in the end, that's what matters. Real people, real justice, and the guts to keep what you've earned. If this hits home, share it. Someone out there needs to hear that it's possible to win.